Today I've got a bit of a hack for the new Garmin Forerunner 970, and if the only thing holding you back about this watch was the reduced battery life compared to the previous generation, you're gonna wanna watch this video. I've been using this watch daily for a few weeks now, and I've learned a lot about it. On paper, the new Forerunner 970 pretty much checks every box for me. I love the form factor, I like the design, I like the sapphire display and the brighter display, but there was one detail about this watch that was really holding me back about it from using it in my everyday life and my upcoming ultramarathons. And that was the battery life. The Forerunner 970 unfortunately took a little bit of a hit in terms of battery life as compared to the previous generation in the Forerunner 965. Now, when I asked Garmin about this reduced battery life, they stated it was due to new features like the brighter display, the flashlight built in, the speaker and microphone consuming space inside the case, and that all made sense to me. But with all that said, I run ultramarathons. In fact, I have a 100-miler coming up in a few weeks, which is terrifying. And spoiler alert, I am not gonna win that race. I'm sort of a mid-pack runner, and it can take me 24 to 26 hours to complete 100 miles. And that's really where my concern with the new Forerunner 970 lies. It's not day-to-day use in smartwatch mode, it's in a GPS activity where I need to maximize the battery life to give myself some overhead so I'm not stressed out about charging my watch mid-race. Who wants to do that anymore? So ever since I've had this watch, I set out to find out exactly how much battery life you can squeeze out of the new Forerunner 970. How long could you absolutely make it last with the right settings? And I think you're gonna be pretty surprised by the results. Before we get into the settings though, let's dive into the spec sheet from Garmin and their claims on this watch. The first thing is standby mode or smartwatch mode, when you're just using it in your everyday life, not doing GPS activities. And they say it can get up to 15 days of use as a smartwatch, which makes sense. But I think if you're buying a $750 watch, you're probably using it for running and biking and all the things where you're definitely not going to see 15 days of use. Now, when it comes to GPS on mode, when you're actually out on that run, recording your activity, that's where things get kind of interesting. In GPS only mode, which is the least accurate mode on the watch, you'll get up to 26 hours of use. If you bump up to Sat IQ mode, which automatically selects which satellite system you're using, you'll reduce the battery life to 23 hours. And if you want the most accurate setting in multi-band or dual frequency, whatever you want to call it mode, you'll get up to 21 hours of use. Now, here's the first common mistake I see with Garmin users out there who have a multi-band enabled watch. Everyone just jacks up the accuracy because they want multi-band turned on because you have that capability. But in reality, most people don't even need to use multi-band mode. It's really reserved for challenging conditions like being around tall buildings in a city or even slot canyons or something like that, where there's a very small opening to the sky for your watch to acquire position. And for the most part, for people using GPS only mode, you're probably more interested in reserving your battery life than you are with having absolutely perfect GPS tracks anyway. With that spec sheet out of the way, let's talk about my real life testing with default settings on the Forerunner 970. I took this watch out of the box, all default settings, charged it to 100%, and went out on several runs ranging from 30 minutes to several hours. And during that time, I recorded a battery loss of 4.8% per hour, which would equate out to around 21-ish hours of total use. Again, that's with all default settings, and that does line up with Garmin's claims pretty favorably of around 23 hours with Sat IQ mode. With default settings out of the way, let's fast forward in time where when I changed all these settings I'm about to talk about here, the results I got in my real life testing. And that was around 1.85% of battery loss per hour, with an estimated runtime of over 54 hours. That is wild. Now, here's the crazy part about these settings. Remember when I said the Forerunner 970 got a reduced battery life compared to the Forerunner 965 here? Well, with the exact same settings between these two watches, the 965 and 970, in a GPS activity, the Forerunner 970 is actually yielding longer potential battery life compared to the 965. Again, identical settings across the board. My theory here between the Forerunner 970 and 965 is that the display on the Forerunner 970 is significantly brighter, but it's also more efficient. So when I turn down the brightness on the 970, it's consuming less power than the 965, if that makes sense. But again, that's just a hunch. I don't have any facts to back that up. That's all I can think of the difference between these two watches. Now, with all that blabbing and test results out of the way, let's get into what I actually changed on the Garmin Forerunner 970. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is dive into your watch settings, of course. Scroll down to watch settings, and then scroll down to where you find focus modes. Focus modes are basically like a subset of settings for different conditions. For example, you can change individual settings for sleep or activity. So I care about activity in this case, I'm gonna click on that. Now up top here, we have satellites. This one's pretty critical, pretty obvious, but if I dive into that, I have all these settings for different satellite systems and auto select. What you're gonna wanna do for maximum battery life is select GPS only. And again, you might think this is reducing the accuracy, but for most people, you're probably not going to even notice that. With the satellite modes out of the way, we're gonna scroll down and go to display and brightness. Again, this is pretty critical because the secondary thing that's consuming battery during an activity is your display. So right up top, we have brightness. For this, I selected the lowest brightness. Now, unfortunately, on these newer Garmin watches, there's only 3 brightness settings. It's either max, medium, or low. I really wish there was an even lower setting because even on the lowest brightness setting with the Forerunner 970, because of the brighter display, it's still very bright. In fact, even on low brightness, I can see it perfectly fine, even out in direct sunlight, at off angles, there's really no problem here. After turning down your brightness setting, you're gonna wanna go down to always on display and turn that off. Again, we're trying to reduce how often the display is turning on. Leaving it on will consume a lot more battery, so always on display off. Scrolling down, we're gonna go ahead and say don't change for gesture. You can leave that on. I didn't find that to be a huge factor, and I do like the ability to twist my wrist in order to see the display. If you do turn off the gesture mode, you will have to push a button on the watch in order to illuminate it to see your metrics. That would save even more battery if you did that, but again, it's sort of like minimal sacrifices by leaving gesture on. Scrolling down again, we have timeout. This is also a very important factor. Timeout will determine how long the screen stays on for when you actually turn it on. So when you twist your wrist and the screen glows, how long will that screen stay on for before it goes back to sleep? For me, I have it set to 4 seconds. Some of you might think that's too quick. Maybe you don't get all of the data you want to see. Maybe you want to bump that to 8 seconds. You can do that, but that will consume more battery. Scrolling down, I left touch enabled, so you can still touch the screen if you want to, but I also enabled touch lock, which prevents you from accidentally touching the screen and swiping through data pages, because as you'll find, that does consume battery as well. So for me, in my testing, those are all the settings I changed. It really boils down to the display settings and your GPS satellite settings. But there are a couple of other things you could do. For example, you could turn off phone connectivity and Bluetooth to limit how often your phone's checking in with your watch. I think that would conserve a little bit of battery life, but for me, I do like seeing text messages and things on my wrist when I'm actually out on a run, even in events. And the other thing you can do is actually remove the map page from your data pages. The map page, if you didn't know, is a very power-hungry data page when you're swiping through the menu while you're out on a run. And when you're navigating and looking at that map page frequently, because there's so many graphics, it's refreshing a lot, it's very bright, it can consume more power. In my testing though, I did leave the map page enabled because it's something I use during races. So I was trying to get the most realistic use case with minimal sacrifices. And that's really it. Those are all the settings I changed on the Garmin Forerunner 970 and some of the potential settings you might want to try exploring with to maximize your battery life. But again, with these settings, I'm getting over 50 hours of use, which is far more than I'll ever need for any 100-mile ultra marathon for now, at least, until I get into like 200 milers. Oh, that's scary. But now's the point of the video. I want to hear from you in the comments down below. Let us know your hacks about conserving battery life with your watch. Have you had to charge your watch mid-race? Is this something you're willing to do and make some sacrifices in terms of brightness and GPS accuracy? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. And as always, after you're done commenting, make sure to drop down in the description down below where you'll find links over to trackbetter.com where you can pick up your very own Forerunner 970 and a bunch of other watches I'll have listed down there. Of course, those are affiliate links and they help support this channel. And after you do that, as always, make sure to hit that big old thumbs up and subscribe button down below if you found this video helpful. All right, that was a quick one. Hopefully you found it helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. I'ma show 'em all how to party if they let me. Cue the countdown and release the confetti.